A widowed millionaire found two freezing twin girls asleep in the back seat of his car during a brutal snowstorm. They whispered, "Please don't send us away." He took them home for one night, but when the law tore them apart, he faced a heartbreaking fight to become their forever family. By the time Ronan Vale left his office, Blackstone Ridge had disappeared beneath a savage white storm. Snow battered the windows of the high-rise all evening, erasing streets, swallowing headlights, muting the world, until even the city looked afraid to breathe. He had stayed late again, as he always did now, long after everyone else had gone home, long after the building became a shell of polished silence and cold fluorescent light. That had become his life since Evelyn died. Work, numbers, meetings, a quiet dinner with Wren, a bedtime story, then more silence. He walked through the nearly empty parking lot, coat collar turned up, shoes grinding through fresh snow. His black SUV sat beneath a pale layer of frost. He reached for the driver's door, then froze. The back window was fogged from the inside. His pulse stumbled. Ronan stepped closer, wiped the glass with his sleeve, and felt the blood leave his face. Two little girls were curled together in the back seat. Twins. They couldn't have been older than 5. Their hair was tangled and damp. Their cheeks were pale with cold. Their coats were too thin, their shoes soaked through. One of them clutched a stuffed rabbit with one button eye missing. The other had her arm wrapped around her sister, like she'd been trying to hold back winter with her own tiny body. Ronan stared in disbelief. The snow fell harder. Then the girl with the rabbit stirred, shivered, and whispered something that fogged the glass again. The other opened her eyes, looked straight at him, and said in a trembling voice so small it barely reached him through the storm, "Please, don't make us go back outside." Ronan opened the rear door slowly, careful not to startle them. Warm air escaped into the storm, and the girls flinched, as if kindness itself had become something dangerous. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "You're okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The braver twin lifted her chin even while shivering. "We just wanted someplace warm." Her lips were turning blue. Ronan crouched to their level. Up close, the damage was worse. Their sleeves were stained, their knees were scraped. Their hair looked as if it hadn't been brushed in days. They smelled of snow hunger and streets that never protect children. "What are your names?" The speaking girl swallowed. "I'm Maisie. She's Nell." Nell buried her face against the rabbit. "Where's your mother?" Ronan asked. Maisie's eyes changed first. Fear gave way to something older, sadder, final. "She doesn't wake up anymore." The words hit him like blunt force. The parking lot vanished. The storm vanished. For one terrible second, all he saw was a hospital room, white sheets, still hands. Evelyn's face drained of color while machines went silent around her. He inhaled sharply, dragged himself back into the present, and tried again. "How long have you been alone?" "2 days, Maisie whispered. "Maybe 3. We slept at the park yesterday, but the snow got too bad." Ronan looked around the empty lot. No adults, no one searching, no one running toward them in panic. Just 2 abandoned girls and a city cold enough to kill. "How did you get in my car?" "It wasn't locked," Maisie said. "We didn't steal anything. We promise. We just wanted to get warm before what? Before they froze." Ronan swallowed the knot rising in his throat and made a choice before logic could stop him. "You're coming with me." Maisie tensed. "Where home?" Nell looked up for the first time. Her face was streaked with dried tears. "You really have a home?" Ronan nodded once, and in that moment, with the blizzard roaring around them and 2 children shaking in his car, something cracked open inside the man who had spent 2 years trying not to feel anything at all. The drive through Blackstone Ridge felt unreal. The heater blasted warm air through the SUV while the twins sat silent in the back, as if they were afraid that one wrong movement might make this miracle disappear. Ronan kept glancing at them in the mirror. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Maisie gave the smallest nod. Nell whispered, "Do you have bread? Not candy. Not toys. Not a phone. Bread." Ronan gripped the wheel harder. When the iron gates of his estate opened, the girls stiffened. The long stone driveway curved through snow-covered pines toward a mansion lit with amber window light. It looked less like a home than a dream no child like them should ever have believed was real. But inside it wasn't grand. It was lonely. The house had once echoed with Evelyn's music. Wren's laughter, flower dust in the kitchen, bright blankets on the sofa, unfinished craft projects on the dining table. Now everything was polished, orderly, expensive, and hollow. Ronan turned in his seat. "Stay here 1 minute. I need to check on my daughter." He climbed the stairs in silence and eased open Wren's bedroom door. She was asleep on her side, curled around the stuffed fox Evelyn had sewn for her before she got sick. Moonlight lay across her blanket like frost. For a second, guilt clawed through him. He had promised her. On the night after the funeral, when she trembled against his chest and asked if it would always be just the two of them, now he had said yes. Always. Ronan stood there with that promise still burning in his memory, while 2 homeless girls waited in his car downstairs. Then he went back to get them. Because some promises belong to grief, and some belong to the living. Maisie and Nell followed him inside on cautious feet, leaving tiny wet footprints on the polished floor. Their eyes moved over everything, the chandelier, the marble fireplace, the framed family portraits, with the stunned disbelief of children stepping into another world. Ronan kept the lights low and led them into the kitchen. He made grilled cheese sandwiches because they were fast and warm and simple, and because Wren had loved them on the worst nights after Evelyn's death. He heated milk, found clean towels, pulled blankets from the linen closet. Every motion felt strangely urgent, as if he were trying to repair in 10 minutes what life had broken for years. The girls ate too fast at first, then slowed when they realized no one was going to take the food away. Nell stared into her cup like it held gold. "When was your last hot meal?" Ronan asked quietly. Maisie looked down. "I don't remember." He turned away so they wouldn't see the devastation on his face. After they ate, he asked where they had lived before the streets. Maisie answered in small pieces like she was handing him shards of glass. A tiny apartment, a mother who got sick, a man who shouted, a place where fear lived in the walls. Nell finally spoke, barely audible. He broke plates when he was mad. Ronan said nothing, but inside him, anger began to wake. He made a bed for them on the long sofa in the den with quilted throws and soft pillows. Maisie tucked Nell in first before climbing beside her. Nell kept the rabbit under her chin as if it were the only witness to her life before tonight. "Mr. Ronan," Maisie asked. He turned. "Thank you for not leaving us in the snow." He didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. Then, softly rough with feeling, he said, "You don't have to thank anyone for being treated like children." They fell asleep almost immediately, curled together under the blanket. Ronan stood in the dim room watching them, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence inside the house felt different, not empty, waiting. Morning arrived in pale winter light and the sound of small feet on the stairs. Wren appeared in the doorway of the den wearing pink flannel pajamas. Her hair a cloud around her face, still halfway between sleep and Saturday cartoons. Then she saw the sofa, saw the 2 girls, saw her father standing beside them. And everything in her changed. Her small face tightened. The color drained out of it. Confusion turned to betrayal so fast it made Ronan's chest hurt. "Dad," she whispered. Maisie and Nell woke at the sound of her voice. Nell immediately sat up and clutched her rabbit. Maisie looked from Wren to Ronan, reading danger the way neglected children do. Ronan knelt beside his daughter. Ren's sweetheart let me explain. But she was already shaking her head. Tears filled her eyes and spilled over before he could touch her. No. No, you said. Her voice broke. You said it would be just us. The words pierced deeper because they were true. He had said exactly that. The twins sat frozen silent as frightened birds. They were cold, Ronan said softly. They needed help. And what about me? Ren cried louder now. What about what I needed? She ran upstairs before he could answer. Her bedroom door slammed so hard the sound rang through the house. Nell flinched. Maisie lowered her eyes with the expression of someone who already expected not to be wanted. She hates us, Nell whispered. No, Ronan said too quickly. She's hurt. But even as he said it, the truth weighed down every word. Ren was not just hurt. She was terrified. Terrified that grief had already stolen her mother and now might steal her father too. Ronan climbed the stairs and stopped outside her room. Ren, he said through the door, forehead pressed to the wood. Please let me explain. You lied. Her voice was muffled by tears. He closed his eyes. Downstairs, two abandoned twins waited in frightened silence. Upstairs, his daughter cried behind a locked door. And in the middle stood one man, realizing that rescuing children from the cold was the easy part. Convincing a grieving heart to make room for them would be much harder. Later that morning, after Ren refused breakfast and locked herself away again, Ronan sat with Maisie and Nell in the kitchen over pancakes none of them could really taste. Snow drifted past the windows in soft white sheets. Ronan asked gently, "Can you tell me what happened to your mom?" Maisie stared at her plate for a long time. Nell looked at her sister as if asking permission to remember. Then the story came. Their mother's name was Tessa. She worked long shifts at a diner when she could stand, and on the bad days she forced a smile anyway. Travis Crowe, the man she had married after the twins were born, had started out charming. Then came the insults, then shouting, then broken dishes, then bruises she always blamed on counters and doors and bad luck. He hated when we made noise, Maisie said. He hated when Mommy coughed, Nell added. Tessa eventually fled with the girls while Travis slept off a drunken rage. They moved into a cramped apartment across town and hid there. For a little while it was better, safer. They had almost nothing, but Tessa made games out of hunger and bedtime stories out of fear. Then she got sick again. Too tired to stand. Too weak to work. Too poor to see a doctor. We told her to go, Maisie whispered. But she said rent first, food first. Ronan had to look away. She slept more and more, Maisie continued. And one morning, she just didn't wake up. No dramatic sobs, no shouting. Just a child saying the worst sentence in the world, as if she had repeated it in her head until the pain turned dull. Nell's lower lip trembled. We waited all day. We thought maybe she was just really tired. Ronan reached for the edge of the table and held on hard. The house seemed to darken around them. He had known grief as an adult, with doctors and funeral homes and casseroles and legal forms, and people saying they were sorry. These girls had met grief alone in a freezing apartment, with no one coming. That knowledge lodged in his chest, like a blade. And in that moment, though, no court had declared it, and no paper could prove it, something inside him began to think of them not as strangers he had rescued, but as children he could no longer bear to lose. 3 days passed in uneasy rhythm. Ren kept her distance. She came down only to eat. She sat far from the twins, spoke to no one, and guarded every trace of her old life like a soldier defending ruins. Maisie and Nell tried to stay invisible, shrinking themselves to fit the house without asking too much of it. Ronan watched the tension stretch through every room, so on Saturday, while Ren refused to leave her bedroom, he drove the twins into town. The toy store nearly undid them. They stopped just inside the entrance, overwhelmed by rows of color and stuffed animals and dolls with shining hair and tiny shoes. It was the kind of place children should enter with delight. Maisie and Nell entered like refugees. "You can pick something," Ronan told them. Maisie blinked. "Really, really?" They chose two simple dolls, one in a faded pink dress, the other in blue. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud. Even in abundance, they selected with caution. When they got home, Wren was in the den pretending to watch television. She didn't turn her head, but Ronan saw every muscle in her shoulders tighten as the twins opened their boxes on the rug. Maisie held her doll like it was made of light. Nell looked at hers, then whispered, "Is she really ours?" Forever hung unspoken in the room. Maisie nodded, and tears spilled down both girls' faces, not the tears of fear or pain Ronan had seen before, but tears of astonished joy. Wren finally looked, really looked. She saw two girls crying because someone had bought them each one doll, nothing more. And for the first time, jealousy met something stronger. Perspective. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. But a hairline crack opened in the wall around her heart, and Ronan, standing in the doorway, saw it. The breakthrough began quietly. The next morning, Ronan came downstairs to find Maisie and Nell sitting on the living room floor with paper and colored pencils, drawing with the serious concentration only children can give to grief. Maisie was sketching a woman in a blue dress. Nell had drawn the same woman with a larger smile and a yellow sun over her shoulder. "Our mom," Maisie said when Ronan asked. "We draw her so we don't forget," Nell whispered. Wren appeared on the staircase halfway through that sentence and stopped. The room fell still. She stared at the drawings, at the tenderness in them, at the way the twins were trying to hold on to someone they had no photographs of, no keepsakes from no room full of belongings to prove she had once existed. "Did she sing to you?" Wren asked after a long silence. Maisie looked up, surprised. "Yeah. What kind of songs?" "Star songs," Nell said. "Soft ones." Wren took a few steps closer. "My mom sang too." That opened it. A blue dress, a green dress, long hair, soft hands, the smell of flour, the sound of lullabies in dark rooms. Three little girls speaking of three mothers who were gone, each trying to understand loss through another child's memory. Then Wren did the impossible. She sat down, not beside them. Not yet. But at the other side of the table, she pulled a blank page toward herself and began to draw Evelyn, bright-eyed, laughing, wearing the green dress that shimmered under kitchen lights every Christmas. No one talked for a while after that. They didn't need to. Three girls who had begun as rivals and strangers sat under the winter sun, drawing dead women back into the world with crayon and trembling love. When Ronan stepped back into the hallway and looked at them from a distance, emotion hit him so fast he had to brace his hand against the wall. Because healing hadn't arrived in speeches. It had arrived in colored pencils, and in the fragile, holy language of children who missed their mothers. By afternoon, the living room had transformed. Cushions covered the floor. Blankets stretched from the sofa to the armchairs in a sprawling, crooked fort. Dolls, stuffed animals, toy blocks, and Wren's precious sewn fox now lived together inside its fabric walls as though they had always belonged to one kingdom. Ronan stood in the kitchen, listening to something he had not heard in his house for years. Three little girls laughing without fear. Wren had become the architect of the fort, teaching Maisie and Nell how to knot blankets, wedge pillows, and make the entrance official with a folded quilt over the top. Maisie invented games. Nell made the dolls talk in whispers. Soon they were all inside the fort with flashlights glowing under blankets like captured stars. Then music drifted from the old radio in the corner. A children's song. Wren knew the motions first. Evelyn had taught them to her years ago, little hand patterns, silly turns, arms opening like wings. She showed the twins, serious at first, then smiling despite herself, when Maisie nearly fell over trying to copy her. Nell laughed so hard she hiccuped. "Not like that," Wren giggled. "Like this. You have to pretend you're flying." Ronan stopped in the kitchen doorway and watched. Watched Wren teach them something Evelyn had once taught her. Watched Maisie clap when Nell finally got it right. Watched Nell take Wren's hands without hesitation. It was small. It was ordinary. It was everything. That night, when Ronan told the girls it was time for bed, Wren stood in the middle of the den and looked at the twins with visible uncertainty. The old fear flickered once more across her face, but only once. Then she asked, "Do you want to sleep in my room tonight?" Maisie stared at her. Nell's mouth fell open. Ronan said nothing because any word from him would have shattered the moment. "We can make a space on the floor," Wren added, trying to sound casual, "if you want." The twins didn't answer with words. They threw their arms around her, and under the soft lamp glow of a winter night, wrapped in blankets and childhood and second chances, the three girls became sisters before anyone in a courtroom ever could. The next 2 weeks passed, like a season changing. Wren taught the twins how to braid doll hair, how to organize crayons by color, how to balance on the stone edge near the garden path without slipping. Maisie taught Wren how to invent stories out of nothing. Nell taught both girls the little humming tune Tessa used to sing when storms were loud. The mansion changed around them. Shoes collected by the front door. Half-finished drawings appeared on the refrigerator. A pink backpack sat beside 2 smaller second-hand ones Ronan had bought in town. For the first time since Evelyn died, the house looked lived in instead of maintained. And Ronan changed too. He made pancakes every Sunday again, stayed home earlier from work, sat on the floor sometimes while the girls played, letting them wrap ribbons around his wrist or hand him dolls with impossible backstories that required full emotional participation. At night, he stood in the upstairs hallway listening to 3 voices instead of 1. Some griefs do not leave, but love learns to grow around them. There were moments when he still looked toward the kitchen and half expected Evelyn there in her green dress, smiling at the chaos flower on her hands, sunlight in her hair. He would feel the stab of absence, then hear laughter from Wren's room, and understand with a strange ache of gratitude that life had not betrayed him by continuing. It had simply brought him back to it. By the 3rd week, Wren no longer introduced the twins as the girls staying here. She said "my sisters," only once quietly when she thought Ronan wasn't listening. But he heard. And that one sentence reached places in him no business triumph or luxury ever had. The house Evelyn once said was too big for only 3 hearts had begun to breathe again. It did not know yet that the storm outside had one more cruelty left to deliver. It happened on a gray afternoon when the girls were building a block castle in the den and arguing over whether it needed a tower for dragons. The doorbell rang. Ronan wiped his hands on a dish towel and crossed the foyer expecting a package or perhaps a neighbor. Instead, he found a woman in a navy coat, holding a clipboard, snow melting off her boots onto the stone. "Mr. Ronan Vale." "Yes. My name is Naomi Briggs. I'm with Colorado Child Welfare Services. I need to speak with you about 2 minor children reported to be living in this residence without legal placement authorization." The words hit like ice water. Behind him, small voices still floated from the den. He knew at once what had happened. Someone had seen. Someone had called. He stepped aside because refusal would only make things worse. Naomi entered the house, and the temperature in every room seemed to drop. She noticed the girls immediately. Maisie stopped stacking blocks. Nell turned pale. Wren instinctively moved closer to them before she even understood why. Naomi asked names, ages, how long they had been there, whether there was any legal guardianship order, temporary custody, filing, emergency placement permit. Ronan had none of it, only shelter, food, beds, love, and the law had no box for that. Maisie's hands began to shake. Nell clung to Wren's sleeve. Wren looked from the social worker to her father, alarm spreading across her face. "What does she want?" Wren asked. Naomi's expression softened for a brief second, then hardened again with duty. These girls must be placed in licensed temporary care until the court can review any petition for custody. No, Maisie said immediately. Nell started crying. Ronan stepped forward. They are safe here. I'm not saying they aren't, Naomi replied. I'm saying you are not legally cleared to keep them. Then Ren, 6 years old and shaking with fury, planted herself in front of the twins and shouted through tears. They're my sisters. You can't take my sisters. Naomi's jaw tightened. Ronan's heart broke. Because he knew before anyone else said it, they were about to be taken anyway. The girls packed their things in silence, broken only by crying. Maisie folded her second-hand sweaters with trembling hands. Nell tucked the one-eyed rabbit under her arm and stared at the bed she had only just begun to believe was hers. Ren helped them pack, furious tears sliding down her face as she shoved pajamas and socks into the small case Naomi had brought. Ronan stood in the doorway feeling like the worst kind of liar. He had promised safety, promised forever. And now the state was carrying his promises out the front door in a suitcase barely bigger than a school bag. At the bottom of the stairs, Maisie looked up at him with swollen red eyes. You said we could stay. Each word landed like a wound. I know, Ronan said hoarsely. Listen to me. This is not the end. I'm going to bring you home. You promise, Nell asked. He dropped to his knees in front of them and cupped both their cold little faces in his hands. I swear to you, I will not stop. Outside, the agency vehicle idled in the circle drive while snow drifted through the iron gates. Curtains shifted in neighboring houses. Somewhere unseen eyes watched the spectacle. Naomi opened the back door. The twins clung to Ronan so fiercely he nearly broke apart on the spot. Ren wrapped herself around them too, all three girls sobbing together in one knot of grief and helpless love. Don't let them take us, Nell cried. Ren turned to her father, wild with panic. Do something. He had money, influence, property, lawyers on speed dial. None of it mattered in that moment, because no amount of wealth can stop a legal process already in motion when the people taking your children believe they are doing the lawful thing. Naomi gave them as much time as she could. Then, not 1 second more. The girls were guided into the back seat. Ren ran after the car as it pulled away. Ronan caught her halfway down the snowy drive and held her while she screamed for her sisters, her voice tearing through the white stillness like something alive and dying at once. In the back window, Nell pressed one palm to the glass. Maisie mouthed 3 unbearable words. You promised us. And then the car turned at the gate and was gone. That night, the mansion was worse than silent. It was wounded. The fort still stood in the den, lopsided and unfinished. 2 dolls lay abandoned on the rug where the girls had dropped them in panic. A child's drawing of 3 sisters holding hands remained clipped to the refrigerator. Their presence was everywhere. Their voices were nowhere. Ren refused dinner. She sat on the floor beside the fort with her knees to her chest and the one surviving flashlight from the blanket kingdom in her lap, as though she were guarding a grave. Ronan stood in the doorway for a long time before she spoke. You broke your promise again. He closed his eyes. There was no defense. Not one that mattered to a 6-year-old whose family had just been split open. When he finally sat beside her, his voice was low and stripped of everything except truth. Yes, I did. But this time I'm going to fix it. Ren looked at him, face stiff with tears and fury. How? By fighting. He had not fought hard enough when Evelyn got sick. Not against time. Not against biology. Not against the blank helplessness of a hospital room. But this was not death. This was a system. A process. A human wall built of signatures and statutes and waiting periods. Human walls could be broken. That night, Ronan did not sleep. Ronan did not. He called attorneys, gathered records, built a file thick as grief, financial statements, letters of character, medical clearances, home assessments, Anything the state might demand he would provide before they asked. By dawn, the snow outside had turned pale blue in the early light. Ronan stood in the den, looking at the fort, the dolls, the abandoned block castle. Then he spoke into the empty room like a vow before a witness. I'm coming for my girls. And for the first time in years, purpose did not feel like survival. It felt like war. The legal process was ruthless in its own sterile way. Ronan met with Graham Pierce, one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Denver, a man whose calm voice hid a predator's patience. Graham read the file, looked up, and said, "If you want these girls back, sentiment is not enough. We need proof, stability, character, continuity. We need to turn your love into evidence." So they did. Home evaluations, psychological interviews, financial disclosures, childcare plans, schooling proposals, emergency contacts, therapy recommendations for trauma adjustment. Every corner of Ronan's life was inspected under fluorescent scrutiny. He endured it all. Social workers measured room sizes, noted locks on windows, asked about his work schedule, his stress management, his bereavement history, his support system, his daughter's adjustment. They inspected the bedroom he prepared for Maisie and Nell, matching quilts, 2 beds, bookshelves, night lamps, fresh winter pajamas folded at the foot of each mattress. One evaluator studied him over rimless glasses and asked, "Why do you want these children?" Ronan answered without rehearsing, "Because no child who finally feels safe should be sent back into fear, and because they are already part of my family, whether the court admits it yet or not." Wren contributed too. Her first letter to the judge was short and angry. Her second was clearer. Her teacher helped her write the one they finally submitted. "They are my sisters from the heart. Please don't make them lose another family." Graham called it gold. Ronan called it unbearable. He visited the shelter when allowed. Each time the twins seemed quieter. Thinner somehow, not in body but in spirit. They hugged him too hard. Asked the same question every visit. "When can we come home soon?" he always said. But outside in the parking lot where no child could hear, he would lean against the car and close his eyes because hope had started to feel like something breakable. Still, he kept moving. Because fathers do not get the luxury of collapsing while their children are waiting. The first court hearing should have been procedural. It turned monstrous. Ronan arrived with Wren and Graham to a quiet courtroom of polished wood and institutional chill. Maisie and Nell sat near Naomi Briggs in borrowed shelter clothes that made them look even smaller than he remembered. The moment they saw him, their faces lit with desperate relief. Then the courtroom door opened, and a man walked in like rot entering a church. Tall, unshaven, cheap suit eyes too confident for a man with nothing decent in him, Travis Crow. Maisie recoiled instantly. Nell let out a small sound and buried herself against Naomi's side. Ronan knew without being told. This was him. The man from the broken plates, the yelling, the bruises, the apartment full of fear. "I'm here for my girls," Travis announced as if he were claiming property left behind in storage. Ronan nearly came out of his seat. Judge Helena Mercer silenced the room with one look, but the damage was done. The twins were shaking. Wren had gone pale with rage. Travis claimed grief, claimed confusion, claimed he had needed time after Tessa's death, claimed the girls belonged with him as next of kin by marriage history and residential association. Every lie came out smooth and practiced. The hearing was postponed for further review. Outside the courthouse, while snowmelt dripped off gutters and traffic hissed over wet pavement, Travis caught Ronan alone near the parking lot. "You look attached," Travis said with a crooked smile. "That can get expensive." Ronan didn't answer. Travis moved closer. "Let's make this easy. 50 grand. You pay me, I sign whatever I need, and those little burdens are yours forever." For one cold second, The world sharpened into something murderous. He was selling them. Selling 2 little girls he had terrorized and abandoned as if they were a problem item at a yard sale. Ronan's voice when it came was quiet enough to be dangerous. "You don't deserve to say their names." Travis laughed. But Graham, standing 20 feet away, had heard enough. And suddenly, the legal battle was no longer just about custody. It was about exposing evil. The night after the hearing, Wren sat at the kitchen table long after dinner with a sheet of paper in front of her, and her small hand wrapped around a pencil so tightly her fingers turned white. Ronan didn't interrupt. He stood in the doorway and watched his daughter, his 6-year-old child, trying to put family into words strong enough to survive a courtroom. Finally, she looked up and said, "How do I explain that they're mine?" The question undid him. He crossed the room and sat beside her. "You tell the truth." Wren bent over the page again. She wrote slowly, sounding out words, erasing, starting over. She described the first time she saw the twins and hated them for making her scared. She described the dolls, the drawings, the fort, the songs, the way Maisie always made sure Nell ate first, the way Nell still woke from nightmares and reached for someone in the dark. She described sleeping shoulder to shoulder in one room because it felt safer that way. Then she wrote the line that made Ronan turn his face away before she could see him cry. "They are not from my mommy, but they are still my sisters. Love found them for us." When she finished, she slid the page toward him. "Is that good enough?" He read it once, then again, then pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth because he could not breathe properly. "It's perfect," he whispered. Wren's expression softened for the first time in days. "Then the judge will understand." Ronan wished certainty came that easily, but he took the letter to Graham the next morning anyway. Graham read it in silence and nodded once. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is what judges remember after the lawyers stop talking." And for the first time since the girls had been taken away, Ronan allowed himself to believe not merely in a legal strategy, but in the possibility of mercy. The final hearing arrived beneath a bright, pitiless Colorado sky. The courtroom was fuller this time. More files, more testimony, more tension packed into the wooden benches like a storm compressed behind glass. Judge Mercer entered. Everyone rose. Graham began methodically laying out the case: emergency rescue, stable home, emotional bond, psychological evaluations, financial capability, trauma-informed care plan, Wren's letter. Travis's abandonment witness statements, from former neighbors' records of reported domestic disturbances, and finally, the attempted cash deal in the courthouse lot. Travis denied it, of course, but denial looked thinner when spoken by a man who could not keep his irritation off his face every time the twins were mentioned. Then the judge called the girls forward. Maisie walked bravely, though her hands shook. Nell stayed close enough to touch her. Judge Mercer's voice softened. "Girls, do you understand why you're here today?" Maisie nodded. "Can you tell me where you want to live?" Maisie looked at Ronan first, then at Wren, then at Travis, who wore a smile that made her visibly flinch. When she answered, her voice was small but clear enough to split the room in two. "With the dad who chose us, not the man who left us." Silence. Judge Mercer turned to Nell. "And you?" Nell clutched her rabbit and whispered, "I want my daddy. Which one is your daddy?" Nell pointed to Ronan. No hesitation, no confusion, no fear. Then Wren was called. She walked to the front in a blue dress Evelyn had bought before cancer hollowed her hands. She looked so small beneath the courtroom lights that Ronan's chest ached. But when the judge asked if she had something to say, Wren stood straighter and said, "They are my sisters." I was scared at first because I thought I would lose my dad. But I was wrong. Loving them didn't take him away from me. It gave me more family. Please don't take them away again. The judge read her letter in open court. By the end, even Naomi Briggs had tears in her eyes. And suddenly, the air in the room changed. Not toward sympathy, toward truth. Judge Mercer removed her glasses and studied the file for a long moment that felt longer than winter. When she spoke, every person in the room went still. This court does not make decisions based on wealth nor on sentiment alone, she began. It makes them based on the best interests of the children. Ronan's hands were clenched so tightly, his knuckles had gone white. The judge went on each sentence, a hammer strike. She cited Travis Crow's abandonment, the credible allegations of intimidation and domestic abuse, his lack of demonstrated interest in the children's well-being, his inappropriate financial proposition regarding custodial rights, his complete failure to provide evidence of a safe or loving placement. Then she turned to Ronan. Mr. Vale, the court finds that you have provided not only immediate emergency care, but consistent emotional, physical, and developmental stability. The bond between these children, your daughter and yourself, is clear, substantial, and deeply meaningful. Maisie began crying before the final words came. Nell gripped Wren's hand so hard Wren winced and smiled through tears anyway. Judge Mercer lifted the gavel. Accordingly, the petition for adoption is granted. Effective immediately, Maisie Rowan and Nell Rowan shall be adopted into the Vale family and shall henceforth be known as Maisie Vale and Nell Vale. The gavel struck wood. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Then the twins ran, straight into Ronan's arms. He caught them both as they crashed into him sobbing, and Wren threw herself in too, wrapping all three of them into one shaking knot of relief and brokenness and joy. Maisie pulled back first, tears streaming, and asked the question she had carried like a wound for weeks. Does this mean we can go home now? Ronan kissed her hair, then Nell's, then Wren's forehead. Yes, he said, voice wrecked. It means you're home forever. Across the courtroom, Travis Crow stood alone, smaller than he had ever looked, and walked out without another word. But Ronan did not watch him leave. Because fathers should never waste victory on men who tried to profit from children. He held his daughters instead, all three of them, at last. The drive back to Blackstone Ridge felt like crossing into another life. No one talked for the first 10 minutes because happiness this big often arrives disguised as exhaustion. Maisie leaned against the window with red-rimmed eyes and a dazed smile. Nell sat in the middle so she could press against both her sister and Wren at once, as though physical contact alone could keep the world from changing its mind again. Then Wren said it first. We should rebuild the fort. Maisie laughed through her tears. And make it bigger, Nell added. Way bigger, Wren said. Like living room disaster bigger. Ronan laughed an open, startled laugh, the kind that seems to surprise the person making it. The sound filled the SUV with warmth. As the estate gates opened, the girls fell silent again. Home stood ahead under the late afternoon sunstone walls, gold against the snow smoke rising from the chimney. It looked exactly as it had the day they left. But now it was waiting for them. When Ronan opened the front door, the girls rushed inside all at once. Nell ran to the den, Maisie to the staircase, Wren to the kitchen shouting, "We're back," as if a house could hear, as if walls could mourn and rejoice. Maybe they can, because the mansion seemed to wake around them, catching their voices and sending them upward through every room like bells. The fort was gone. The housekeeper had taken it down days earlier, but the memory of it still lived in the carpet indentations and forgotten ribbon scraps beneath the sofa. Wren looked around with narrowed, strategic eyes. Okay, she declared. We start tonight. And Ronan, standing in the foyer watching his daughters reclaim the home that should never have lost them, thought of Evelyn and whispered inwardly, You were right. This house was built for more life. 6 months later, the house no longer needed to be called alive. It simply was. Morning began with 3 toothbrushes in the upstairs bathroom, 3 bowls at the breakfast counter, 3 backpacks by the door. Wren had outgrown her jealousy so completely, it felt like remembering another child. She now corrected anyone who said the twins with quiet pride. My sisters. Maisie had become brighter, less guarded. Her laugh came easily now. Nell still kept her rabbit close at night, but no longer in daylight unless she was sick or sad. Fear had not vanished from either girl. Trauma never leaves that cleanly, but it no longer ruled them. On the first day of school, the three stood in matching navy uniforms at the front gate, cheeks pink from the cold lunchboxes in hand. Ronan lifted the camera. Closer together, he said. They instantly leaned into each other. Click. Then they hugged. Click. Then laughed. Click. A woman passing by smiled and asked Ren, "Are these your sisters?" Ren didn't hesitate. "Of course. We just found each other a different way." Maisie's eyes filled first. Nell grabbed both sisters' hands, and Ronan behind the camera had to blink hard before he could take another photo. That evening, they made pasta in the kitchen using Evelyn's old recipe, the one with too much basil, and the sauce simmered low until the whole house smelled like memory and comfort. Ren stirred. Maisie grated cheese. Nell carefully placed forks on the table as if setting the stage for something sacred. Over dinner, they talked all at once about classmates, crayons, library books, and playground politics. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just ordinary family noise. And after everything they had survived, ordinary felt holy. When Ronan tucked the girls in that night, each of them asked for one more minute, one more question, one more reassurance. "Forever," Nell asked softly from bed. Ronan smiled. Forever. This time it was not a hope. It was law. It was love. It was home. Much later, after the girls were asleep and the house had settled into the soft creaks and sighs of night, Ronan walked through the darkened rooms without turning on any lights. Moonlight silvered the staircase. A doll lay on the den rug. A child's drawing was taped crookedly to the refrigerator door. 3 winter coats hung by the entrance. One larger than the others, all dusted with melted snow. He stopped in the living room. On the mantel stood a framed photograph from that morning. Ren in the middle, Maisie and Nell on either side, all 3 in school uniforms, smiling with the unguarded joy of children who know where they belong. Beside it was an older photo of Evelyn. For a long moment, Ronan looked at both, the past and the present. The woman he had lost and the family that love, pain, chance, and relentless fight had somehow built in the aftermath. He picked up the new drawing the girls had left on the coffee table earlier that evening. 4 stick figures holding hands beneath stars and pine trees. Underneath, in bright, uneven letters, were the words, "Our family." His throat tightened. He sat on the sofa in the quiet and let the peace settle over him slowly. Not the numb silence he had lived with after Evelyn's death, but a full silence, the kind that comes after laughter, after dinner, after bedtime. Stories after doors close on sleeping children who trust tomorrow will still love them. At last he looked toward Evelyn's photograph and whispered into the stillness, "The house is full again." Outside, snow began to fall over Blackstone Ridge, soft and white, and nothing like the storm that had started all this. Upstairs, 3 little girls slept safe in their beds, and downstairs, a millionaire who once thought grief had finished his story finally understood the truth. He had not rescued those girls alone. They had rescued him too. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.